da, croeso i cyfarfod, diolch am bawb am dod. Hello and welcome to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's first thriving Merthyr Tydfil Scrutiny on Tuesday 24th of June 2025. Please note that this meeting may be recorded and broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I think we're all in. We're all here. Full house. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. None? Okay. Agenda item 3, forward work programme. Okay, so we've got a forward work programme. We haven't really had a discussion. We've met with cabinet members and we've been discussing it. But so this is a shout out to you guys. What if there's, you've seen the forward work programme. Is there anything you want to add, or we're happy to in the coming weeks have a meeting with us all to discuss as well? Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think when I went through the list, it's quite thorough. There's a lot of things in there that could come forward. But there was something in particular that we raised in a meeting a few months ago when we talked about the speed of vehicles around the town and the general highway provision and parking. And perhaps what we need to have is a full, complete report that comes to scrutiny. To see, what the future of the town centre is going to look like with the highways and the parking.
Okay, that's a good idea. Councillor Bill Smith.
Thank you, Chair. On saying that comments, but we did mention about the traffic problems from to Redicar, and the traffic problems we'll have up with the new school up in top of the avenue and around the Gurner section there, where it's so narrow, because we're afraid with all the cars are going to travel up there, right, to Bishop Ellie New School and Penrith anyway. It will be chaos. So we've brought it to this committee what highway is going to do on it.
Okay, yeah. Sarah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't know whether Judith wants to come in as the director, obviously responsible for that area, but just from, she's got her hand up, but just from a scrutiny perspective, we have to have something to scrutinise, so members need to think about what aspect of that they would be able to scrutinise and, make recommendations to Cabinet on. Information reports can be done in an informal briefing to members, so there's different ways of us getting information out to members. But I would just sort of say that if we put things onto the forward work plan, it needs to be clear that there is something for the scrutiny committee to scrutinise. Thank you, Chair. Yeah,
that's fair enough. I think we'll get together and we're just coming up with the topics now, so the headlines, and then we'll come up with the detail at a later date. Judith, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add to what Sarah said, really, obviously in particular to the item that Councillor Smith mentioned, that has been subject of a planning application that was considered at planning committee and approved. So I'm not sure that scrutiny would be the right forum to consider that then.
Okay, we'll have a discussion and then we'll feedback to you guys and then decide on a way forward. Phil, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just an observation really about the layout of the forward work programme. I take it is a draft. Yeah, if it's a draft. Yeah, my main concern is obviously that, for instance, we're dealing with one issue today. For September the 23rd, there are 3 major reports which are likely to be tabled for that meeting, and I'm concerned that there's an element of imbalance among some of the some of the items that are specifically itemised for particular dates.
Yeah, there's a reason. It was supposed to be 2 today. The events policy was supposed to come in, and we were asked to postpone it and move it to September. So there would have been 2 in September and 2 today. So
do you think we'll have sufficient time in September to be able to deal with all those 3 reports and reviews of policy?
I never like having more than two, to be honest, especially if they're large. But you know, circumstances were beyond our control. We really wanted. We've been waiting some time for the events policy to come in, and it's unfortunate we weren't able to bring it today.
Would it be possible then for one of the others, either biodiversity and waste management, to be moved to a?
Yeah,
another?
it was too short notice, to be honest. We were it was literally last minute. We were told that it wouldn't be coming, and it was too short notice to bring another report in. I do take on board what you say, though.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
No worries. Councillor Smith.
I know we haven't going to have time to discuss it now, but we are going to have time because we've got open space on 10th of March next year.
Yeah.
So can we take the officers to look at the two issues? Can they bring them in there?
Yeah. Well.
After Christmas, you know.
Yeah. Well, let's meet in the coming weeks, and then we'll pick out where there's space, and then we'll decide what we, as a group, what we want to bring in. Okay. Yeah. Sarah, do you want to come in?
Yeah. So. Just to come back on both comments, really, forward work plans are an indication of the forward work plans, and they're, as the Chair said, they're a fluid document. They will come back to, I think, each meeting of the Scrutiny Committee for you to have a conversation about, and for officers to move things around if the Chair and Vice Chair are happy with that. You're right, the optimum sort of number of items would be 2, really, for a committee to look at and consider, in any great depth. But we will continually be looking at it and taking, obviously, views of you as the committee in terms of, the ongoing sort of forward work plan. But it's not set in stone. But, as the Chair said, that's based on the initial decisions, and unfortunate that we only had one item to bring to you today, but we'll keep this under continual review.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? No? All good? Okay, moving on. Agenda item 4, fly tipping policy. I'd like to invite Councillor David Jones to present.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I say how delighted I am for this policy to be scrutinised today? This policy is the result of a huge piece of work by officers, politicians, South Wales Police, Dŵr Cymru, NRW, registered landlords, MVH, MTHA, Wales and the West Housing Association, Keep Wales Tidy, Flight Tipping Action Wales, and Blaenau Gwent and Neath Talbot local authorities. Apologies if I've missed anyone out for that. All over Wales, indeed the UK as a whole, fly tipping is a blight on our towns and villages, our countryside, and even our recreational spaces. We have been fortunate to have had input from Blaenau Gwent and Neath Talbot local authority, who appear to be further along the enforcement route than we are, and have been happy to assist us. I believe this policy is essential in order for us to fight back against those that would blight our county borough. And on that note, I will pass you over to Councillor Declan Salmon, who will provide further detail of the policy.
Yep. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dave. I'm not going to give on the policy. It'll be more on the task and finish report. That's an appendix on this item. As it says in the task and finish report, and as Councillor Jones has just said as well, fly tipping is an ongoing problem, which has a detrimental effect on the environment and the whole community. And this isn't just in Merthyr Tydfil, this is nationally. I've been a councillor for 8 years, and the issue of fly tipping has been on every forward work plan for the relevant scrutiny committee during that time, and it seemed that we were getting no closer to dealing with the issue. We've got just for example, we've got a fantastic group of volunteers in Dowlais and Pant, and every time we joined up with them, we got the impression that they were thinking, "You're a councillor, what are you doing about it?" The purpose of the task and finish report was to investigate and identify the cause of fly tipping in Merthyr Tydfil, to highlight what we were doing correctly, but also highlighting where we can improve, and then to make recommendations based on the findings in the report, which would then hopefully help to reduce the number of fly tipping incidents in the county borough. The report had input from council officers, Welsh Water, Natural Resources Wales, Merthyr Valley's Homes, Merthyr Tydfil Housing Association, Keep Wales Tidy, a local community group and elected members, so quite a broad range. Following the completion of the task and finish report, a working group was set up and chaired by Sarah King and Judith Jones, who along with everyone involved within that group have done some excellent work. I think it's only right now that I hand over to Sarah or Judith to give an overview of that working group and what went into it. Thank you, Chair.
Sarah?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, so as members can see in the report, the working group came together and we have worked through the terms of reference which are at Annex 1. The main aim of the working group was to increase the integration across departments because, as you will know, the fly tipping and sort of littering aspects fall across a number of departments within the organisation. And we also wanted to look outside to identify what best practice was being delivered so that we could provide a better outcome, obviously, for our residents in Merthyr Tydfil. We have made some sort of quick wins through that working group. So we had Blaen y Gwent Council come in and share what they were doing in terms of education, awareness and enforcement. And some of the enforcement powers and tools that we weren't utilising, we now are. We've reinstated the regular communications around our prosecutions and our fixed penalty notices. Again, really just to demonstrate that we are taking action for our communities. We've worked really well with our external partners and we've already agreed a set of overt and covert operations. We've also shared some information that we have with RSLs to enable them to manage their collections on their sites in a more effective way and to help remove sort of duplication. But there's still lots that we want to look at and improve further. For example, the recording and understanding of the data that we hold in terms of fly tipping, so that we can better target the hotspot areas that we know are in place across the borough and deploy things like additional CCTV in those areas. But we're also looking at potential pilots with Keep Wales Tidy in terms of littering and fly tipping prevention plans in line with the national framework put in place by Welsh Government, and also with Fly Tipping Action Wales on a sort of fly mapper system pilot with Merthyr. So we continue to work with those organisations to see whether or not we can take those forward. But I'm really pleased from my directorate's perspective in terms of the way that officers have come together across departments. So, I mean, you'll see here today we've got officers from legal, we've got officers from public protection, from waste management, from cleansing, from corporate comms, and we've also involved the town centre team and the corporate data team. So across mine and sort of Judith's areas, we've had a huge engagement and commitment from all officers who've been involved. And so I'm really pleased to have brought this joint report through the Cabinet members today. We have also made a big step forward with our external partners, and hopefully you'll see some of that indicated in the report. And they have indicated to us that they want to continue the monthly operational group meetings that we have in place. So Neil has helped support and facilitate this work. So we have already got diary markers in with them going forward. To work with them to enable us to continue to share best practice, but also identify areas that we can work better together going forward in terms of education campaigns, but also enforcement. And I just finally, sort of as directors, we will ensure that this new integrated way of working stays in place, because I think that's the only way that we're going to drive improvements for residents across Merthyr Tydfil in this area. If I could, Chair, I was going to hand over to Paul just to go through the amendments that we've outlined in the policy and the flowcharts.
No problem. Paul?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. If I can take members to page 25 of the bundle, what we've put together, and I think what's important is, although it's titled as fly tipping enforcement or a fly tipping process, I think the first thing we did as a working group is look at waste offences, and we didn't just isolate fly tipping. And I think this has been probably one of our problem areas historically, is there are numerous types of offences related to waste. That can range from domestic waste not being presented correctly for collection, littering, fly tipping, what we class as traditional fly tipping, business waste. So what we did is we discussed the definition, because obviously dependent on what the definition of the waste is where that's sat within the corporate structure. As you know, there's been numerous changes around waste enforcement. Fly tipping now sits with public protection. Other waste offences sit within neighbourhood services. So some of the frustration I think members may have had historically was some of that difference of enforcement across different departments and the customer journey to get into those departments. So within the report, what we've first tried to do is outline to members the different type of offences relating to waste. That outlines within the policy on pages 27, 28. Outlines our enforcement and compliance powers, obviously from investigative powers, the enforcement action we can take, right the way through then to fixed penalty notice. Members will be aware, obviously, fixed penalties are issued historically for first-time offending, and that could lead to prosecution if not paid. So within the policy, we've outlined the fixed penalty notices, what those levels of fines are, and what has historically been agreed. I think more importantly within this report is section 7, which is the procedures we're going to adopt in enforcing. And I'll take members then quickly on to appendix 2 and 3, which is an agreed flow chart and customer journey, which will apply across the organisation in terms of any report of waste. What I will do is I'll take members left to right, which will probably be easiest to start with. So if we look at fly tipping procedure for public council land, we'll get a report in that there is waste being identified at X premise. That will come through to a one-stop shop to score me record, which will be picked up then by our first line of administration. That will be allocated then to the hit squad or to our waste services. So you'll know the Keeping Up with Joneses campaign. So if on that receipt of that complaint, we know it's related to a domestic dwelling who's put out too much waste, top hatting of a bin, that will go through to that team. If it is potentially a fly tip, that will go through to our hit squad. The hit squad go out on site. They will identify the waste. They will look for identifiers in the waste. If there are identifiers in the waste, as the flowchart shows, the next stage is at a critical site. So what we'll do at any one time, if we know there's a hotspot area within the county borough, we'll define that as a critical site. So for argument's sake today, I could define British Tip, I could define Bogey Road, and I could define Goatmill Road in Dowlais as 3 critical sites. So what we would ask the hit squad is if you come across any waste identifies at those sites, that immediately goes through for enforcement action. If it's not a critical site, the procedure will then be is the hit squad will clear the waste. Most importantly, they'll clear the waste and they'll refer that through then to Christian's team. And then what that will generate from Christian's team is a communication to that member of the public, if it's a first-time offender, that waste has been found identified to that individual. It will outline to that individual what corporately they should be doing in disposing of their waste correctly. And that will give a full information pack ranging from putting out your own waste right the way through to if you're using waste carriers who will come in and take in excess waste, how you can protect yourself that you're only using legitimate carriers. A record of that stage 1 approach is then made. If that individual then reoffends, so we take ourselves back on the journey, we find more waste in 2 weeks' time, and identifiers found, and Christian's team identify, well, hold on, we've sent a stage 1 warning to that person. That will go to stage 2, which will be the formal action, fixed penalty notice, stroke prosecution. So what we're hoping is that we can, number one, cut down the number of cases we take to court for first-time offenders, which unfortunately the court then, on occasion, are not proceeding because the individual will say it's been waste that I wasn't aware I put out on the wrong day. It was waste that was removed without my knowledge. It was somebody else who put the waste out. So we take away that wastage of corporate resource in taking those cases to court. We educate, we try and point our residents in the right way to dispose of waste. But obviously, if there's repeat offences, then we go down the formal enforcement action route. By adopting the stage 1 and stage 2 approach, what we are doing is communicating to the public as the council, not as individual departments. So the letter that will go to the individual in stage 1 will be a corporate letter saying, this is how, if you've got domestic waste, this is how you should deal with that across all council directorates. So that letter will say, from putting your household waste out the front, right the way through to using a waste carrier, these are what you need to do things legally. So a customer gets all information without the legal jargon to say, we found waste identified to you, not correctly disposed of. This is how you should do it. If you don't do it and you're caught doing it again, there will be formal consequence. So we're hoping this process that's outlined in Appendix 2 will provide assurance to members that there won't be the internal hiccups we were previously having in identifying what type of waste is this. Is it fly tipping? That sits with public protection. Is it domestic waste? That sits with the Keeping Up with the Joneses campaign. And I know for you as elected members, the frustration you have in chasing a complaint through and finding out what is actually happening with it. This process gives a streamlined approach that all departments are signed up to, that in terms of customer journey, elected member journey, that is the process it will take. Right the way through to possible enforcement action, but also reserves that we can take strong enforcement action at critical sites. And I think that's where we are looking at your top of your Gerrig Hill, Bogie Road, Goat Mill Road, those sites. There's no excuse why waste should be on the Bogie Road. So if we do find identifiers, we can still take that robust action. But a lot of the work that is causing issues for us at the moment is in residential premises, streets within the county borough, bin bags are put out on wrong days. They're wrongly being classed as fly tipping when it's in fact misrepresented waste, and it's causing that delay and that confusion. This process will align all our enforcement activity in an agreed flow chart that hopefully will make it easier for the community, make it easier for you as elected members. I'll stop on Appendix 2, just in case there are any specific questions around that flow chart before I take you on to Appendix 3, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Is there any questions around Appendix 2? Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, not so much on the actual chart itself, Paul, right? But, you know, the Welsh Government sets the laws for fly tipping and environmental offences in Wales, and in England, it's the Department of the Environment, etc. So there's a separation. Mm-hmm. So I just wonder, right, because I would have thought all councils in Wales would follow the same plan to a certain level, especially, you know, with us, it would be us, RCT, and Bridgend being part of the Public Service Board, where fly tipping, I know, is you know, one of the topics that's discussed there. So is it worth putting anything in there, reference to the Welsh Government laws and policy as well?
Yeah, in terms of the legislation, you're quite correct, the legislation applies to every authority. That tends to lend itself to the outcome of an offence. So that'll either be what the offence is, or it'll be the level of fixed penalty notice or the level of fine in court. So we are consistent, we are the same as every other authority when it comes to the enforcement of. What each authority will have a different process for is how they manage that investigation across different directorates. And that's where Blaenau Gwent coming in, East Port Talbot coming in. We've been able to pick best practice, how different departments deal with, different authorities deal with the workflow, and obviously incorporate that in this flow chart. However, the outcomes of the offences are consistent. We'll treat the offences exactly the same as any other authority would. But what we haven't done is tie ourselves up with the specific offences in dealing with the investigation. By streamlining the investigation, we get to the end point quicker, easier, and the customer will get a better service in terms of the waste being removed in the first place, that we haven't got different departments defining, is it domestic waste, is it fly tipping? It'll be dealt with, gone, and a consistent message going out from all departments in the one communication.
So, supplementary question, if I may, Chair, and I'm on that, is so, you know, because we're all under the same public service board umbrella, Cwmtaf Morgannwg, so are we working almost in line with each other? Would there almost be a mirrored policy across the three authorities, or do you think it's going to be slightly different?
It'll be different. Different authorities have got more resource, and they will deal with it differently in terms of departmental structure. Where we are, we've tried to come up with a process that meets the structure we've currently got in Merthyr and the resource that we've got in Merthyr. And we're quite confident that this process will lead to us delivering a better service without additional investment going in. So it's in terms of value for money, it's a better process than we're currently delivering by delivering it differently and smarter.
Well, that's positive for the residents of the council taxpayers of Merthyr. That's really positive. I've got a few other questions, Chair, but it'll more likely come towards the end of the presentation.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. David, do you want to come in?
Thank you. The streamlining looks quite good, but because of the streamlining, are we likely to see an increase in the issuing of FPNs?
What was quite interesting in the workshop is bringing in the experts from the flight in action groups. Is they don't see the FPN as the golden bullet. It's all about changing people's behaviour in terms of dealing with waste. And they were quite impressed with our plan that FPN is now a first go-to. It's about getting people on board and educated. There was some quite good research undertaken where just looking at a consumer who's got excess waste, how easy is it for them to find out, how can I get rid of this legally? If you start off with the pretense that I don't think anybody wants to fly tip, but you will have people with excess waste who will think, how do I legally dispose of this? So this is where our comms plan comes in with our corporate comms team. And we need to take that approach to change cultures. And yeah, those who are persistently going to offend, those perhaps who are making money out of offending, which is probably where we need to be targeting enforcement action, that will still remain. But perhaps what we need to do is move away from thinking FPN is the golden bullet, more to behavioural change and educating people on how to legally dispose of waste. So I think the stage one approach, we were actually applauded in one of the workshops of looking at that education tool first before jumping straight to a £400 fixed penalty. Yeah. When perhaps that individual doesn't know how to properly dispose of waste. So by crossing that bridge there might change that culture and that behaviour. For me, secondly, if that person then goes on to offend and I take them to court, I can show the court they've had ample opportunity to do it correctly. Good, yeah. So we can get a better result at court as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks both. Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Chair. Where are we on being able to use dash cam footage for littering or fly tipping? Are we able to do that?
Any evidence received from a member of the public showing a fly tipping will be investigated in terms of what the evidence presents. However, what we need is that individual to provide evidence that we can take to court if need be. If the individual doesn't want to give us the evidence and they want to provide it as what I was calling intelligence, then we will log who's done it, and then we'll probably have to put a proactive operation to catch that individual. But if a member of the public came forward with dash cam footage, we'd certainly take it. I can totally understand why a member of the public may not want to give a witness statement to go to court, fully understand that. But that wouldn't mean we couldn't still use the information they provide to assist us with further inquiries.
So you could still use it even though they didn't want to be identified as the one coming forward?
Yeah, we wouldn't put that in the public domain or in the court domain, but we would certainly use that as information for us to steer our investigations going forward. So, you know, for argument's sake, if it showed a flatback truck dumping on a particular piece of land, ideal scenario, we'd like to use that evidence in front of a court, fully understand why somebody may be reluctant to stand up in court and produce that footage. But once we got the number plate and the individual, it doesn't stop us then investigating that individual. So it'll become an intelligence product rather than evidence.
Okay, I think my next one is for Appendix 3, so I'll wait till you've moved on. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Layton. Councillor George.
Not sure if I'm in the right section, but I'll follow on from Councillor Layton.
Yeah, Paul, what's it? You said you were going to present something else. What are you going to go on to after? The task and finish group or the next
The next slide, which I know will be of interest to most members, which is private land.
Yeah.
So I think Clive might have been waiting for that one.
Correct. Before we go on to that, because there was a question asked about cameras, we've talked a lot in previous scrutiny committees about where the cameras are, how effective the cameras are. And on page 47, and this was in answer to a question, I presume it was a member of the legal department gave this answer, and I quote, I don't have any figures, but from my recollection, I can't recall using any CCTV images as part of the evidence pack in a prosecution. I'm not sure if CCTV has acted as a source of intelligence or if it's been used for FPNs without having come to my attention. Somewhere else in this report, it refers to figures. 70% of people have found out if they've, for example, fly tipped by going through the bags and identified. 30%, surprisingly, are by witnesses, and only 5% is from cameras. So my question is, we got cameras out there. I presume we still use COVID cameras. At one time, they were like hen's teeth. You couldn't get a COVID camera because there was an enormous waiting list for them. So how effective is cameras in identifying them and, more importantly, taking them to court and being used there?
I think Sarah wants to come in, Paul. Sarah?
But just come in first on that, Councillor Jones. So this was we had quite a lengthy discussion with Blaenau Gwent Council on this and their use of cameras. Actually, and I think we, collectively learnt quite a lot about what sort of camera you need, what sort of camera they use, how they deploy them, where they deploy them. But I think and so we had quite a discussion in that we probably weren't utilising ours in quite the most effective way, but that's certainly something that we will pick up in the operational group going forward. Because there was an offer as well from Fly Tip and Action Wales that we may be able to access some additional funding for additional cameras. But it was quite clear from our discussions with other local authorities that you didn't necessarily need an all singing, all dancing camera to be able to capture what you needed to be able to take that as part of an enforcement or a prosecution. And I think in terms of those stats, it was quite clear that some of the other local authorities use a huge percentage of their prosecutions go forward with CCTV evidence because it's much more, I wouldn't say easier to get a favourable outcome in terms of a prosecution, but they certainly had a lot more CCTV evidence as part of their prosecution. So we've certainly learned lessons, and we will look to increase and think about how we utilise cameras going forward. I just wanted to...
Right. Can I ask a question, Sarah?
Of course.
So you're obviously next door authority. We've been doing lots of the things that we are doing. But from what you've said, Sarah, I deduct from that they've been using their cameras more effectively than we have. Is that wrong?
I don't think it's wrong. I think they had a set of data. They had sort of gone through this conversation that we've been going through the last couple of months quite some time ago. And then they had decided, depending on the data, depending on the hotspot areas, they had targeted particular areas across the borough where they had the most, amount of fly tipping that was basically done by individuals dropping off rubbish, waste by the side of waste bins. That was their main issue at a point in time. So that's what they deployed their cameras in those particular hotspots, and that's where they got quite a lot of favourable outcomes in terms of the recognition and the evidence that they could use as part of the prosecution. So I think for us, it's just ensuring that the data we've got is the best it can be to enable us to target those hotspots and then use deployable cameras or cameras with, and they also used quite a lot of overt cameras with signage, and they still, again, got quite a lot of favourable prosecutions from that outcome. So it's certainly, I think, opened our eyes in terms of how we can utilise some of our cameras, maybe in a more effective way going forward.
So as a result of doing things a bit differently, as a scrutiny committee, can we expect that there'll be more court cases? Because what I've never understood is that if the camera is working properly and you see individuals there that can be identified, you show this to the magistrates, it's there, right in front of them. But according to the information we've got here, we've only ever used at the maximum 5%.
If I can just come in there, Chair. In terms of the page 47, this was the initial scanning document that Councillor Salmon and Leighton carried out of their concerns, and it was some time ago now that this was done. Not speaking for Simon, but I'm sure Simon will confirm there's been a lot more case files that have come through now with CCTV. So it is being utilised more, and that CCTV provided by the public, where we've had some good-minded, spirited people have come forward with good footage and provided statements, and I think people should be applauded for coming forward on that, but also working with our RSL partners and with our own CCTV. So we have shifted towards more CCTV. What this policy will allow us to do as well is, with the limited resource, and I know members are probably sick of hearing limited resource, but we are small in numbers, is our current enforcement lead has spent the majority of his time dealing with the identifiers in waste. And that can be quite a long process of an investigation. And what we're finding is we're probably not getting to the people we should be getting to by concentrating on individual black bags being dropped. What this policy and this process will give us is that stage one element will take away a lot of that time-consuming work, and we can now put that time to more effective use of CCTV in hotspot locations. So, I confidently say, I think in the next 6 to 8 months, the prosecutions you'll see coming forward won't be a black bag found at the side of a road. It'll be far more intensive work, and hopefully the fines will follow for the level of offending.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Chair. Have we got, at this moment in time, sufficient overt and covert cameras throughout the county borough to help us?
In terms of CCTV, we've got a fantastic CCTV footprint under our CCTV section. In terms of what I class as deployable cameras, we've got some deployable cameras. I'd like more, and we're in the process, and Sarah alluded to by Fly Tipping Action Wales are probably going to support us with more cameras as well. So yeah, we will have more deployed out and about, but also other enforcement tools that we're looking to use as well. So hopefully members will see the prosecutions won't just be one black bag found with the letter in. It'll be more robust investigations of people who are making money dumping in Merthyr, which are the ones we really need to get to.
I got other questions, Chair, but I'll leave it until at the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Clive. On the back of Clive's questions, in terms of, you mentioned about sufficient resources, obviously we are a small local authority, but it's all well and good having the cameras, but do we have the resources, human resources, to go out and check the cameras as well?
Again, this is just working smarter. Yeah, I'd love to come here and say I need another 3 or 4 officers, but I've got to be realistic. That's not the case in the current climate financially. But I do think that we've got experienced officers who, in terms of deploying cameras, providing we're putting them in the right locations, we should get tangible results from where we're working. But again, CCTV isn't the only tool. We are using other tools as well. I don't want to go into too much detail, so I'm mindful this is a public forum and we don't want to show our hand, but there are other techniques we can use, which again, officers are starting to use. Now they're freed up from chasing individual black bags, which has been really time consuming.
Thanks, Paul. My one last question before I call Councillor Smith in is, in terms of, you mentioned about the CCTV system, and it's excellent where it's, you know, it's all new. But have you identified all the areas that we could upgrade, and what the cost would be to upgrade it to way, you know, blue sky thinking?
In terms of town centre, I think we're pretty well covered in the town centre with those CCTV. Some hotspot areas that have been previously identified, we've put cameras in place or in the process of being put in place. British Tip being a prime example, that's been a historical hotspot area. We've now got a camera there. But as technology's moved on, there are redeployable cameras that are giving us as good footage as your fixed cameras. So I think what we need to do is get a pool of those that's redeployable across the county borough, rather than having fixed cameras, because once it's fixed and people know it's there, you'll have a new hotspot place where there isn't one. So we need to be flexible in where we deploy, and I think technology's moved on. As Sarah said, there's cameras we can now utilise which are quite cost effective, and I think we just need to build our stock up.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Comments you made now is good, because it's helping us to take it a step further. But you're on about land and rubbish on land. Are we working with people throwing rubbish out the cars? Because you've got all these cameras everywhere. You come up to Goodness on a weekend, you go McDonald's parks all over the place. It looks a mess. Right? Go to Prince Charles daily, people go to Prince Charles throwing rubbish out the windows. So can we use them cameras to pick it up? And the other part comment you made, that I know we haven't got the staff to control the CC cameras. If we employ somebody, can we ring fence the funding from the fines we have into that department to support it?
Yeah, firstly, in terms of the littering in itself as an offence has been discussed as a working group. Spoken to both our cabinet members during the working group around possible options for the authority moving forward with litter enforcement, and that would cover vehicles. One of Paul's team is quite hot and following up CCTV footage of vehicles disposing at the moment, so we are doing those inquiries. One of the problems we've got in Wales is that England adopted legislation that if waste is disposed of from a car, regardless who's disposed of it, the registered keeper's liable. Unfortunately, that legislation hasn't come in Wales. So we would still technically, to issue a fixed penalty, we would have to issue it against the physical disposer of the waste. And that can be difficult because you're into the world of identifying individuals. Whereas if it was the vehicle owner, it'd be straight off. It would just be issued to the registered keeper and that'd be the end of it. So through the working group, we fed that back into Welsh Government, and we hope that that will form an amendment eventually, that we'll have the same legislation as England, and then it would be relatively straightforward to do.
Are we got a time limit on that when the amendment will come through? I hope it's before the next election.
That's within the gift of the Flight Tip in Action Wales, who we've been working with, that they feed it back to Welsh Government as part of and in fairness, they've done it with all authorities. They've asked for sort of wish list of legislation that they can take back and feed into the review that's taking place. So unfortunately, I can't give you a time limit, but it would certainly help us with the example you've given there.
Paul, thank you much.
Thanks both. Councillor Leighton.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to go with Appendix 3, but I'm following on from Clive. A flight tipping incident which went to court is mentioned on pages 61 to 63 in Appendix 3 of the report. I know you're going on to the report, Paul, but I thought it's just as easy to ask now. Although it is heavily redacted, elected members were sent the unredacted version last year. The court case was withdrawn because the police officer's identification evidence did not comply with Pace Code D, or, in other words, wasn't sufficient or good enough. What has been or what will be put in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again when we need the police to help with the conviction? Is that for legal or?
I know the case you're talking about. I think it's down to the individual police officer that we contact. We needed that officer to identify the person that was in the video, which was done. But you need to do more than that. You've got to say why, for instance. Has this person got tattoos? Has this person, is his MO to do a certain thing? And we weren't getting that. If you chase somebody long enough for that information, that's disclosable. And the other side will see that, then you have to disclose that. And then they'd say, well, you almost forced this evidence from this individual. Now, I think that was down to the individual police officer that we couldn't get that information from. The next police officer could be fine, But I don't.
But has that been highlighted and sort of brought to your attention with the police? Because sometimes we do need their support.
I personally haven't. I don't know whether it's come from your end, Paul.
Yeah, we do have regular feedback on joint working, so it would go through the normal channels back. I think what Simon did identify, and this goes back to the littering question that Councillor Smith said about IDing people. Once we're in the world of identifying an individual not known to us, I'm sure many members here have seen TV programmes with a line-up parade and you ask a witness to pick out. And the PACE codes of practice are quite specific in that we have to be careful as an authority that we don't lead a witness, even if it's a police witness. So it's a learning curve for us as well, in that if we come across an individual we don't know, we have to follow the same guidelines as the police in that scenario, in that we have to show perhaps a range of people who it could be for the police officer to pick out the right person. So again, it's a new world for us. But yeah, I do take your points on board, and as Simon said, the reason we didn't pursue that case is because of the legal challenge we had, and yet that is fed back through normal work we have with the police on joint working ops.
We did pursue it. There was a not guilty plea entered, so we then got in. We were going to get into a trial, and I thought that our chances at a trial were compromised because of that, and we withdrew at that point.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I know that. I'm just saying that, are we aware now that these things happen within the police? As you said, witnesses do want to come forward, but you would think the law would want to abide by that. So I'm just wondering, is that fed back in the meetings you do this case, perhaps as an example?
Yeah. Again, as I said, I don't want to lay the blame firmly at the police.
No,
I
I'm
think
not.
It was a learning curve for us as well, in terms of having a case where the individual was not known in terms of something we could evidentially put in front of the court. So for us to get a witness to ID this person was new for us as well. So certainly a learning for both parties. And I'm sure that should we face the same scenario again, the witness statement will be different, because we'll know exactly what we need to be in there to have the strength to take it to court.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've seen the footage, and I think if the footage was for another incident, more severe case, the police would have identified him no problem, because it was quite evident who he was. So, Phil, do you want to come in?
This is connected with the stage 1 process, which you outlined quite clearly, and I can see this also on the on Appendix 3 as well. It's just a question about the stage 1, really, which I think we all agree that stage 1 is a sensible way of approaching this issue in the first place. But have we done any stage 1s yet? That's the advisory, the education visits. Have any of those been carried out?
So they've been carried out under Section 46 for the side waste, but not for this yet, because obviously we haven't got a policy in place for it yet. But no. Yeah, education we have given out during Section 46.
Yeah, but not connected with this. Obviously, this has not been adopted or accepted yet. Yeah. Is there any indication that you could tell us what those advisory stroke education visits would entail and how they would be carried out? Would they be a face-to-face? Would they be sort of online? Would people have to come in here, or to go with another place where you might identify?
The stage 1, as we see it, it'll be an information pack will go out from the council. It will explain that waste has been found with that individual identified, that it hasn't been disposed of in the correct manner. It'll be simple information on how you can dispose of your waste correctly, in terms of if it's household waste, it'll be from Chris's team will be use recycling, use the general waste if it's not fit for recycling, but it'll also give the link in there to say, should you not have these receptacles, which if you think of some of our properties that are high turnover, somebody may take a flat up, the bins have gone from where they were historically, it's somebody who doesn't know what to do next, so that letter is going to be vital to them to say, all right, I'll ring the council now, I can get a new bin, I can get the recycling. If it's fly-tipped waste that has been found, within that information pack will be, you know, this is what you need to look out for, your waste carrier's licence, this is how you don't get into trouble for doing it, here's where our recycling centres are, here's when they're open. So that resident will get a pack to say, you were waste, it tells you everything in here what you need to do. That will be kept on file by Chris's team. If 2 weeks later we find another piece of waste with that individual's details in that show, number one, they haven't gone back to Chris's team, they've heard nothing from it, then I'm sure Chris's team will look at it and say, well, if that is domestic waste, i.e. they should put the black bag at the front again, then Chris has got his enforcement tools to use. If it's found at the side of a road in the town centre and it's not associated to a property, they'll come over to public protection and we'll pursue the fly tipping. So the stage one, historically, from both our sides, would have been very legally minded. You know, you've breached section XYZ. Perhaps wasn't as open to the resident to say, look, here's how you could stop doing it. And I think that's a learning for us. So it's more getting the customer on track, because through the working group, the examples given to us from some of our third-party colleagues was a lot of people want to comply but don't know how to. So I think it's changing that culture for us to say, you know, we're giving you a chance here, here's how you can put it right. So it'll be done by letter with information.
I think I was confused over the word visit.
Yeah.
And that to me implies somebody knocking on your door, ringing you up, arranging an appointment of sorts. So perhaps that's not clear in that stage one would entail an education process as opposed to a specific visit.
I think what we may have covered there is Chris's team have got wardens. So if, for instance, they come across somebody who's misrepresenting their waste, again, don't want to steal Chris's thunder, I'm sure he can come in, he can explain that the wardens will physically be on site.
Yeah.
So in those scenarios, there would be a visit.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think because
it's the definition of that term, isn't it, and the use of that term, because it's a term which can be defined in various different ways. I think a clarification there would be helpful.
Thanks for raising that. I think that's what we'll do. We'll put greater detail in there that it's clear what circumstance for the visit. So thanks for that feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Nobody else is indicating. Paul, do you want to go on to the second flow chart?
Okay. Private land. This was probably came out quite strongly from the reports from Councillor Leighton and Salmon's initial feedback, and from all elected members at various scrutinies. There's been issues where waste has been dumped onto private land, which then the authority has an illegal responsibility to remove. In a lot of cases, that has left the landowner as a victim of crime, in that the vast majority of these that they haven't deposited the fly tipping waste on, but the tools open to us as an organisation were then enforcement tools against the landowner. So again, what we've done is we've looked at a process we can use. So if the waste identified is on private land, a letter will be sent, a generated immediate letter will go out to the landowner, reaching to the landowner to ask them to work with us if they know who's dumped the waste, if they've got CCTV, if they've got any information who's dumped the waste, because then we can obviously take an action against that individual. If the landowner doesn't know what that individual is, we would then politely explain to the landowner that even though they may be a victim of crime, unfortunately, they are responsible for the removal of that waste. Again, we're not going to be overly prescriptive in terms of what piece of legislation, because as members will know, there's a raft of different pieces of legislation that could cover waste on land, ranging from planning law to public health law. But again, we want to be just general to that landowner that they still have a duty under pieces of legislation. We can signpost them to where perhaps there's asbestos collectors, where there are legitimate waste collectors who could assist them in removing of that waste, but giving them a time limit to remove the waste by. What will automatically happen from there is that worksheet will then go to environmental health. Environmental Health will monitor, has that waste been removed? If that waste hasn't been removed, we'll then examine it as environmental health, as a public health risk. If it's not public health related, so if we're talking about wood, for etc., or builders material that doesn't present a public health risk, we have then worked with the planning colleagues and we'll refer it straight through to planning, where perhaps that seamless process hasn't been there historically. And we've had sort of ping-ponging of members' emails going between departments. What this process is we're all signed up to is there is a worksheet flow now that will be, the letter will go out immediately, it'll be allocated to environmental health as a first port of call, it'll then be allocated to planning if it's not an environmental health related issue. So that work stream is in place. If there's identifiers in the waste or the individual comes through to us and says, well, actually, I've got CCTV footage, or there is identifiers in the waste, then again, then as it's on private land, that'll go straight through for enforcement then. But it's that first reach out to the landowner to say, look, there's waste on your land, work with us if you know who's done it, but obviously you still have a responsibility. We will have landowners who will feel that they're unfairly targeted because a lot of these will be innocent victims. But from members' feedback and from the community's feedback, it's the broken window effect. If you don't move the bags that are there, soon more will follow and it'll become a bigger issue and a bigger eyesore. But it's a way of us starting the process and dialogue without going straight to enforcement. So it's a change in terms of process mapping. But for us, it gives us a timeline and a worksheet to follow in terms of receiving that information through to the various departments for enforcement action to be taken, should it need to be taken at the end.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, just a comment on the question then. I think it's a positive move. I think most of the fly tipping in the area is on private land, so it is positive. But the question I've got is the time. You know, we have to be consistent with the time there. So any idea, you know, how long are we going to give, you know, a landowner to clear that if there's no evidence there, Paul? You know, is it weeks, months, you know, or it depends the size on the...
I would say weeks. You give sufficient time for them to arrange for a waste disposal company, etc., to come through. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't look at months because that would just become... It'd attract more waste. So again, we'd give a reasonable time that it would take somebody to employ a contractor. We wouldn't want to say 7 days because then we'd be rushing to enforcement action. So yeah, you know, 2 to 3 weeks should be sufficient to get somebody in and remove the waste. If it's not clear within that 3 week period, for instance, then obviously more stepped enforcement approach can be taken because we've given that reasonable opportunity. But I think then what we will have, from an elected member's point of view, we may have those individuals coming forward and complaining that they're actually victims and we are now targeting them. So I think that's where it's important for us that if members are in agreement that we've got the policy in place that we are acting with members' permission.
Yeah, and I think for us as members, you know, to be able to give a consistent, you know, time frame to everybody, if it's 21, 28 days, everybody knows where we are. Because we know a lot of this fly tipping on private land, on the large scale stuff, is usually on a boat. And when I say a boat, I mean a byway open to all traffic that we can't block up. And they're going to come straight back at us and say, council, block up that road, and they will stop it altogether. But we know, again, Geraint from, Simon, through Geraint, a lot of the legal challenges we've had in the past is that we can't stop those roads. So that's a bit of a minefield for us.
And I think this is where the work in progress comes in, because we're back to that enforcement isn't the silver bullet. And you know, Sarah touched on earlier, this isn't the end of the journey. This is quite the start, because once we've got this process in place, we then need to build on working with the RSLs and partners and working with the different third-party sectors to say, well, how can we change people's culture and behaviour in Merthyr? Why are people fly tipping? Why are people driving to the top of Ilgeric to dump something when we've got 2 recycling centres? I don't understand that. But of course, we need to find out why. And we need to make that easier for people to understand how they can legally dispose of items, because I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning wanting to be a fly tipper. I can't see why.
It's a business, isn't it?
Well, you know, if you are making money off it, then they are the ones who need to be caught. But from a member of the public, I can't see why somebody would want the fly tip, and it's educating them how they can do it, and then finding out for us corporately as well why there's gaps, why they're not. That perhaps we can change the way that we operate. So again, it's having that dialogue.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Councillor George.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What I'm particularly concerned with is the reaction of the owners when we get in touch with them. Now, from what I've seen so far, believe it or not, but from what I've seen, I think we have started on the improvement road to dealing with problems on private land. Now, I don't think I would completely identify this area, but there are officers here who will know what I'm talking about. And it's an area of land just off Brecon Road with a public pathway by the side of it, and this is the opposite side to a pub. I'm sure one or two of you got it straight away. And that area of land was identified for housing several years ago. Nothing's ever been built on it. So as far as I know, it's still identified for private land. But because it's so close to a public pathway, somebody throws a few cans over there, they think, oh, I'll do the same, bottles go over there. No, I haven't walked there very recently, but if anybody went to collect it, they'd have, you know, dozens and dozens of bags to fill up. That's in this particular area where the litter is really, I think on occasions there's black bags being thrown over there, but in the main it's litter. Now in the past years, I've been in touch with planning to use section 215 of the Planning Act, which from my experience of reporting these things is probably rather weak, to say the least. So I've never gone to anywhere else in the past. Environmental health, I might have perhaps asked the area environmental health officer to look at some time. So to get it clear in my mind, from now on, that sort of example would be straight to dealing with it under this flow chart, and I presume it would be somebody going there, seeing what it was, identifying whether it's pure litter or fly tipping, and use, because I think one of the Bibles that I read here that we are using is section 33 in brackets 1 of the Environmental Protection Act 1990. And that seems to me, there are maybe other acts on the statute book, but that seems to me to be the main one from now on that we were dealing with. So just to clarify, because I don't think I'll be doing it much more, and I've written to the head of planning last night about another property in my area which has got problems within the grounds. But from what I can see, that particular section of the Planning Act is really not much use. So for clarification, I'm just asking you, Paul, through the chair, is that from now on, the example I've given, people will deal with this, and it will be through being dealt with under the Environmental Protection Act 1990.
It'll be used in the appropriate tool. So if we can show that the person knowingly has allowed the waste, then that is one of the enforcement tools. Planning is another enforcement tool, and antisocial behaviour is another tool. But what I can assure you is it will land in an enforcer's inbox to take the relevant action.
But I think what I'm saying is I've used a particular act before, which comes under planning, and we haven't had any really good results from that. If I should have perhaps many years ago started down the route, but things have changed from there on.
I think Sarah and Judith want to come in.
Oh. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, Councillor Jones, I can understand where you're coming from, because the kind of remit and success of Section 215 is acknowledged as being limited. It's a tool or piece of legislation we can use where the condition of land affects the amenity of an area, and that is kind of open to interpretation. However, what I would say is we have had success with Section 215 previously. Very often, an initial letter to landowners threatening the use of the 215 has been enough, and it has cleared up areas. But, I can think of some instances that you've been involved with previously where perhaps it hasn't had the desired effect. But yeah, just to support what Paul says, it certainly is one of the tools that we can use and we will be using moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sarah.
Yeah, so just to say again, on this particular issue, I think we found that we didn't have a consistent approach, because I think the previous stance had been, we don't necessarily take action on private land. When we spoke to our colleagues in other local authorities, they were saying that even though there is not a requirement, because of the effect of not taking any action at all can have on the environmental sort of adverse areas, across a particular local authority area, they had put in place very much similar to what we've got here. So they have put in place something where they go out to the landowner immediately, and then go through the different stages that we've potentially outlined here. I think what we've historically had in place, that in the majority of cases we haven't taken any action at all. So this will be quite a change. But again, the local authorities have said to us that they have had relative success when they have engaged with private landowners, but that won't happen in every case. And then obviously there might be other tools open to us to clear that land, or some of them said that actually they would clear the land there at a cost to the local authority. So that would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But I think we have to do something. And so this is our sort of recommendation to, the amendment to the policy is that we at least put in place this amendment to try where we can to get landowners to work with us to clear the majority of cases on private land.
And the issue is, in the past, we all 30 elected members came up a blank wall. We cannot step on to private land. You can't. Impossible. You can't do it. But that seems to have changed totally by the look of it. And the one thing that all elected members were facing with the electorate is we've been told to clear up that area, which is only a matter of yards away from this particular plot of private land. And when we tried to explain in the past to the public, no, it's private land, there's a different issue, we can't step onto it, I can tell you now, most of the electorate, when we were explaining that to individuals, their eyes would glaze over because they could not understand. As a local authority, they were saying, but surely you've got the powers to get in touch with the landowner and deal with it. So I think that is the thing that's changing now, and hopefully from here on in, we will be able to ensure with landowners, Chair, that if there's fly tipping or litter, whatever it is there, as the landowner, they have a responsibility to deal with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Sorry you waited so long, Phil. Do you want to go?
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of issues here, just like one, private land. I can understand, and the process looks to me to be a lot clearer and possibly able to follow it through. This is to do with unregistered land. It's very abrupt here. If the land is unregistered, we're only collecting items in the air in the local authority's interest. There's lots of unregistered land in Merthyr. I'll give you an old estate, Castle Park. Every green area in Castle Park is unregistered. I know because we've been looking to take, as a community group, we've been looking to take over a couple of patches of land there just to do a bit of work in them and tidy them up. They're unregistered.
They're owned by the bloke of the property.
There's lots there we've locked. We've done a search this last week.
I can tell you who owns the land.
Right, well, I'll take that back then, okay, with that. But there must be other unregistered areas which are a problem. The other one comes down to, I think you need an Appendix 4 here. And I think your Appendix 4 should identify who's responsible for picking up fly tipping and or litter in forestries, on riverbanks, on railway lines, on highways, because believe you me, everyone thinks it's the council's job. Now, you know and I know that it is not, but there is very, very little awareness out there of who's responsible for picking up either fly tipping or litter that's distributed all over these particular areas. And I think that, as you've identified what specific types of fly tipping may be in Appendix 1, I think an awareness in the public of which public bodies, other than the council, are responsible for littering in those areas would be of a real help in explaining things to the general public in simple terms.
Thanks, Phil. You made some really good points. Sarah wants to come in here.
Yeah, so just to say, obviously, we've had a number of discussions, as the Cabinet members outlined, with different bodies that cover some of that. So what we will do is, if the amendments to these policies, and I take your point around an Appendix 4, but I think these were the immediate issues that we wanted to address in the first, set of improvements to the policy. But we will certainly consider that as part of the operational group going forward. And if the policy gets adopted by council, we will then, and our corporate comms team are already working with us on this, we will work to get then a lot of sort of information and education assets out. And as part of that, we'll make sure that there's clarity in terms of who and which authorities are responsible for what, and if we can, link into some of the sort of frameworks that are out there, like Councillor Thomas said previously, the Welsh Government have got, we will do that as well. So yeah, we'll pick that up as part of the communication and awareness campaign. If council adopt this policy going forward, we'll try and make sure that clarity comes out to residents, as part of that adoption of the policy.
Yeah, and it isn't the council passing the buck, because the responsibility lies with other organisations that are often faceless, just acronyms, basically, and no one has any indication of the fact that they have the responsibility to look after these particular areas. I think we need to get out there and fight back with these organisations, because they will sit back and do nothing, from what I can see. I'm talking about Sutra, aren't we? We've been on about Sutra on the highways, and they won't do anything. And I think we ought to fight back as a council and say, look, there are other organisations that we will be working with, and make the public aware that we are going to be working with these organisations. Anyway, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your reply.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to bring it up to the end, but now Phil has come in with that point. In 6.2, it says about integrated ways of working. And I take that as being, not just internally with the authority, but working with our partners. And like, we know that, most of the fly tipping in Merthyr, is NRW land, Welsh water, as far as the riverbanks are concerned, and some of the most dangerous places. And, on the A roads, which is, the trunk roads, which are responsible by Sutra. And I think it is important that they are mentioned. And, they're all members, again, of the Public Service Board, and they should be able to account for their actions, or lack of actions. They should be there. But I raised this point now, but I was going to bring it at the end. And again, it's what NRW do with their licences to the waste carrier licence. You know, is there enough scrutiny given to some of the individuals or companies that apply for a waste carrier licence by NRW? And perhaps, again, through, you know, not so much this policy, but with our integrated way of working with our partners, we bring them to account on that as well, because we know that criminals get these licences quite easy, and even after they've been caught, they still have licences, and they still, you know, fly tip across the borough, you know, and across Wales or countryside. So I think it does need to be. They do need to be held to account, and if it's here or if it's at the PSB level somewhere, they've got to be answerable.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Jones. Thomas, Councillor Jones.
Yes, thanks. Just to support what both Phil and Councillor Thomas has just said, I've had a few communications with our friends NRW, National Resources Wales, recently, the last few weeks. Talk about an organisation that, in my view, is nowhere near any accountability for their actions. This is one organisation. And I won't keep you a few seconds, but I'll tell you what it is. Several weeks ago, a number of us here helped with cleaning the Taff Trail from the top of Kerman all the way down to the bottom end of the valley. And I was one of those who covered the section, and large part of that section goes, most of it, by the side of the River Taff. Behind Martin Evans' house, which is just across the road from here, because I don't walk that way, you know, and I haven't been there for quite some time. But we identified that not only litter, but there was fly tip in there. So naively, I thought, river embankments, they are the entire responsibility, because it's a watercourse with NRW. Wrong. When I have identified an officer, a local officer from the NOW, who I could communicate with, and that took a little while, so it eventually landed on his desk, and he wrote to me, and he said, no, that's nothing really to do with us. That's other organisations, including the local authority. And I wrote back and I said, well, I thought you were responsible. Oh, no. We're only responsible if it interferes with the watercourse. And there we are. So I've passed that email correspondence on to officers, to Mark Panniers, and he is currently dealing with it, Chair. But this is farcical. It really is farcical. We are doing whatever we can to clean up the litter and fly tipping, and right smack bang in the middle of Merthyr Tydfil, there's an organisation who, in my opinion, are not accepting their responsibilities, because they're saying, really, in essence, it's nothing at all to do with us. So this is something, if we do meet these organisations, and I've never met an NRW officer face to face, because I did ask if they could come down and meet him and talk it over with. Obviously, there was no point, really, in the reply I had received. So we have issues with other organisations who, in my opinion, are certainly not as accountable as elected local authorities.
Thanks, Clive. I have to agree with Councillor Jones. I used to fish the rivers all around here for like 20 years growing up. The rivers were terrible. Yeah. But now we got amazing rivers, and we got footpaths going alongside them, but we can't see our rivers because the trees are overgrown and there's litter everywhere. So I agree with everything you say.
Just one other thing, on a much more positive note, it's several instances of fly tipping over the last year using the council system, and it works really well. Yeah, it works really well, as long as it's on council land, obviously. But when we've reported it, it's been collected, and it's been collected swiftly and quickly. And I think the system that you've got in place for reporting it through members of the public is really good. The problem we've got is getting the members of the public to realise it is there. Because I'm sure a lot of members of the public have no concept at all about the fact that they can report these kinds of things. And when it's reported and it's dealt with by the council, it really does show the council in a good light.
Thanks, Phil. Paul wants to come in there.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks for the feedback. And I agree. I think that's one of the things we've noted in the working group is the entry point into the council has to be right. And that then dictates the workflow in these charts. I think the problem we've got, and you're quite right, is perhaps communicating to members and the public in terms of the right mechanism of bringing the complaint in, because once it comes in the proper format, from Paul's team right the way through to Christian and myself, it's quite streamlined. But I think it's making sure that that's communicated, that this is the entry point. I think you'll get a reference number back by email in terms of what's been referred to you. So when you are chasing the complaint, you've actually got a worksheet number you can follow. So the system is great. Yeah. I think we just need to publicise more that that is the entry point in. And then it's the confidence then with your worksheet number that will be tracked to whoever's currently got that worksheet and will be answerable. And I think, yeah, we need to push people down that avenue for reporting.
Yeah, I've said it before in enabled services, the system of reporting a litter bin when it's full is absolutely brilliant. It's emptied within hours. Yeah, so rather than people moaning about the fact that there's litter near a bin and people don't, but just report it. It gets, as long as it's not on the weekend, it gets done. And I think it's the publication of the way in which you can enter the problem, which is part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree with Phil. System is really good. I've been guilty of it myself, emailing officers rather than doing it through the right channels. I think educating all of us, including the public, about the way forward and how to report. The only thing I would say with the system is if you could add more than one photo to the system would be really good. And also the location, how, like, I'm on my phone, I'm having to drag the, it picks up, say, in Merthyr, but you've got to drag it all the way to, say, Gurness, and it can be, maybe 3 little words or something along that line. If it's not identified as a street, it's identified as an area. So, yeah, that's all I got. Councillor George?
Yeah, sorry. I got a question in relation to when we're talking about private land, there are private estates, which is been referred to, but private industrial estates, because we got at least one of those in my ward, and if you just drive around there, it's the Cyfarthfa Industrial Estate, and go around the back end of it, you'll see a bit of a mess. Now, I've had to raise this in the past. I've raised it again. Initially, this time, with the local environmental health officer, and he was going up there to investigate it. But the owners of the land, of industrial land, are no different to private landowners, because they've got a responsibility to clean it up. And I'm sure, in the case I've just mentioned, nobody who owns the land there has driven around there probably in the last 30 to 40 years, because they would, if they are proud of that, I'll be very surprised. So, again, there are issues with private industrial estates as well, Paul.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Thomas?
Chair, just going to pick up something on what you said about the having identification of areas. It's like with on the highway side of it, with streetlights, they numbered. So when you report the streetlight out, you report the number of the light and it gets fixed. Can we number the bins? They have. But can they tally in?
Just to come in here, they're all numbered with a QR code on.
Right. So
all the new bins that go out.
So we do that and send that in. That's sorted. Great.
Yeah, I was just referring to if it was fly tipping on land or wasn't on a street and moving the identification markers like a little cursor, a pin you've got to drop. so it can, you know, it can be a little bit awkward, that's all. Anybody else? I don't seem to have moved on to comments more than questions, but has anybody got anything else they want to say? No? I'd just like to thank all the officers. I'd especially like to thank Councillor Salmon for all his effort with the task and finish group. I know my name's on it. I had a very minimal input into it, and Councillor Leighton, she as well, likes to thank her. Okay, officers, we're going to be really quick, so yeah.
We were completely finished with
Oh,
it.
right, okay, yeah, go on.
In the report, it mentions 2 operatives that pick up the identified litter. By the sound of it, that hasn't changed. Correct me if I'm wrong. But 2 operatives would get, on average, 6 weeks holiday a year, so that's 3 months out of the year. If one of them's off sick, that means there's only 1 operative there to pick up this litter. Is that being looked at?
Yeah, just to come in here, Councillor. What we did when we took the hit squad, if you like, when we took them back on board in neighbourhood services, we integrated them into the street cleansing teams.
Right.
So if any of them are off, they are covered by a cleansing.
Right. So that's not a problem now then?
No.
Ah, okay. Okay, that's answered. Thanks very much.
Sarah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just to be clear, to pick up the amendment that we're going to make to the flowchart. So as a recommendation from Scrutiny to Cabinet that we amend that flowchart to make it clear, so that it's not sort of referring to a visit. People won't expect a physical visit, that they'll have the letter with the information pack. So we need to, you know, that needs to be a formal recommendation to Scrutiny that we amend in the policy on that basis. And just, I think for actions for me, maybe Chair, or myself and Judith, we will take back to the operational group. We will raise the issues that have been raised about the other organisations and responsibility and accountability, and we will also make sure that those are clarified as much as possible when we do the education campaign. But also, I think an amendment, again, a Cabinet, you know, recommendation to Cabinet and Council when the policy goes up, is that we confirm the timescale for the engagement with the private landowners. So I think that's really important, so that we get a consistent approach, and we can speak to our local authority colleagues who already have that in place, and, you know, see what the average timescale is, so that we're not being over or under sort of, you know, with our sort of people here in Merthyr Tydfil. So those 2 recommendations, I think, to amend the policy in those ways come from the Scrutiny Committee, Chair. Thank you.
Do you want us to approve this to go forward for approval to the local authority? Do you want to raise of hands if everybody's... Yeah?
Yeah, based on those sort of recommendations to Council, that we amend the policy as those 2 sort of, you know, we clarify that it's a letter to go out at stage 1, not a physical visit, and that we confirm and clarify that there's a timescale that will be consistent for all letters that we go out to private landowners.
Okay, great. Is everybody in agreement? Yeah? Show of hands. Yeah? All in agreement? Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Agenda item 5, scrutiny referrals. We discussed that in earlier in item agenda 3. Feedback on scrutiny activities. There's no updates at the moment. Item agenda 7. Any other business deemed urgent by the Chair? I have none. I'd like to bring a meeting to a close and thank you all for attending.